So let's start right away. My name is Franco Del Campo. I'm here not so much as a journalist, but because I've always been a friend of Diego Bravar, and I have to thank him for his energy, for his vision that goes hand in hand with a very marked pragmatism, which is very valuable for Trieste and our region. Our task is daunting. We have to summarize, and this is one of the nicest things to do, we have to summarize what has been said so far in this two-day conference. We don't have much time available. 7, 8 minutes to be generous. 7 for each couple of speakers, because we have 7 topics to deal with. So please, I'll be a very strict moderator here. I'll ask you to be very concise. The first topic, which I believe is pivotal versus what you've been done so far, is health and well-being. This is one of the most important goals of humanity. We don't have Stefano Ruffo here with us, so I'll ask, where are we starting from? No. We start with the second couple of speakers, so research for technological, biomedical technological innovation, Agostino Accardo and Francesco Menegoni. Francesco Menegoni. I am with you remotely. Do you see me? Yes, we do. Yes, we can see you. Welcome. Maybe we give the floor to Agostino Accardo first. Very briefly, you have the floor. I'm sharing my screen with you. I've summarized in one slide the most important topics that have emerged yesterday, In particular, problems on clinical experimentation, because we've seen that in certain instances, experimentation should take place abroad because it's much faster than in Italy. And the other problem has to do with complying with the prerequisites of the new European regulations for implantable devices, as well as for medical and medications devices. So we have to make a summary, but also we have to list new perspectives. And my suggestion is to see whether it is possible to accelerate experimentation times in Italy. This is what I'd like to insist on. And then as for European regulations, from the viewpoint of training, we as a university are trying to train engineers that can really be up to date vis-à-vis the newest regulations, so that they can implement them in the companies where they go to work. And then there are universities where there are a lot of research activities, but even within companies there is research being carried out. But what we need is an improvement of tech transfer in between universities and companies in both directions. We grow as a university when we are informed about new innovations introduced by companies, because sometimes innovation doesn't come from universities. So this tech transfers is necessary in both directions so that we can integrate. I mean, creating synergy, we've heard about that a lot, and even the creation of clusters. During COVID, companies have been able to react promptly after the initial shock. There were problems in selling certain products, and these companies were really able to adjust very rapidly. They opened up to new sectors. For instance, they invested on project of molecular biology and point-of-care systems. And this may be a goal that other companies could share right in this period. Then we've highlighted the role of incubators and private entrepreneurs. And this role is necessary both to translate research and development in real product, but also to develop new ideas. So we have to say yes to spin-offs, but we really need to let them grow rapidly. And finally, we have to connect university research and training with the needs of our companies in terms of innovation. And here I'm inviting companies to participate in the definition of our university curricula, because at times we do not talk to each other as for the university and the role of universities. We're willing to collaborate and support companies in the field of industrial research in the biomedical domain, and the sectors are the one listed here, the classic ones. And I hope I've kept within the time I was allotted. Actually, you've really made up for our delay, and you've especially given us a wonderful synthesis of that session, the relationship between companies and university. Now I give the floor to Francesco Menegoni. I'll be very concise. Now, thank you, Professor Accardo, for having summarized yesterday's presentations. I think it is important to stress that research, favored by the fact that we in this region are a strong innovator, and both because the region is specialized in the field of smart health, we have seen that more than 60 million euro turnover has been able to exploit co-funded research projects to become more resilient in the era of the pandemic. Now, to think about future perspectives, and not just at regional level, I wanted to stress that here in Trieste in August, the G20 took place on digitalization, and there important topics were debated, like the promotion of innovation as an ecosystem, and this is an ecosystem that we have here, how important it is to support private-public collaboration, and how we should concentrate on life sciences. And I'd like to conclude with a 10-year perspective. From 2021 to 2030, the United Nations have decided that this is going to be the healthy aging decade. So this is something that we, with our research, can actually bank on. We can be main actors. Rather, we have to move from waiting medicine towards the initiative medicine. In other words, we can use biotechnological instruments, biomedical instruments that allow us to be proactive to ensure a better quality of life. Thank you. I was a pessimist at the beginning, but you've been indeed very good, and you've kept within the time you were allotted with your summaries on the research and biotechnology innovation session. if we go on like this, maybe we'll have time for a couple of questions. If the organizers agree, I thank you, Professor Accardo and Francesco Menegoni, and I'd like Maurizio Fermeglia and Alberto Steindler to come here for a summary of the plenary session devoted to education for health and well-being, technology, innovation.
Grazie.
Thank you, Professor Fermeglia and Alberto Steindler. We're going to be talking, I have a confession to make. I will speak about a preference because I'm a professor of philosophy. We're going to talk about training and hence education. Without training and education, we wouldn't be here. None of us would be here today and wouldn't be able to do what you're doing today. So I will give the floor to Professor Fermeglia. Maurizio, please. Thank you. Not only training, but also technical innovation. We spoke about it in our session. And four macro topics have emerged. The first was focused on the training of biomedical engineers and clinical engineers. Radko Majarevic talked about the role that the biomedical engineer has in the transition between science and practice. A fundamental element in the transfer and the human relationship between science and the user. He also mentioned a very hot topic in training in the distance learning era, how difficult it is to keep attention for the trainers and the trainees when doing lessons online. And he also emphasized another aspect that Roberta knows full well, which is the fact that we lack time. We have money, we have resources, but a shortage of time. He mentioned that when developing the drugs and new technologies, the time the one that is against us. We talked about the clinical training of engineers, and then he gave us good indications or suggestion why not have a specialization phase for clinical engineers like medical doctors, like physicians, maybe a shortened one, in which to develop a capacity to work in a team, which is another aspect that today is fundamental. And I must say that following COVID, teamwork was a little bit not valued enough, undervalued. Then Sara Marcelli, who is responsible for the degree course in clinical engineering and medical engineering, she talked about those who are the graduates and the fact that they find a job very quickly, which is very positive, and she's highlighted the great negative impact of distance learning in labs and experimental theses. Alberto Steindler, who is here with me, talk about technical schools where he showed us a hospital without patients, which is used in series and films. And he also emphasized the importance of the lifestyle. We talked about proactiveness. With a correct lifestyle, we can be thoroughly proactive, especially with an aging population. A second topic was that of AI and data science, which is connected to biomedical engineering. Luca Bortolussi explained what is the structure of this training at the University of Trieste, and he announced shortly a data science institution will be set up to transfer competences that were acquired during these training courses. A third topic was internalization. We had two speeches, one from the ICTP that spoke about the Masters in Medical Physics. And the objective of this Masters to balance deficits in poorer countries compared to richer countries in radiotherapy and imaging, which is of high importance. They do so with students coming mainly from Africa. The ICGEB has international corporations on dissemination of science rather than scientific projects, and in that case their objective is to foster collaboration north-south with a special emphasis on women, because we know this is quite in danger in underdeveloped but also developing countries, if I may say. We spoke about diagnostic kits developed with the young. Another topic which was a bit outside training and moved towards research, Danilo Licastro from ARIA S.p.A talked about genomic sequencing, reference point in Europe in this final stage of COVID, when the variants and COVID mutations needed to be traced. And here also we have to be proactive through identifying the genetic modifications. He also spoke about multiple sclerosis, cancer, transplants, and he concluded by saying that all of this is wonderful. Without training, there will be no future. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for reminding us about the importance of science that must be mirrored into practice. Engineer Steindler is here with us, who is the president of the Alessandro Volta Foundation. And if we talk about Volta as a scientist, but also as a technical institution, the floor is yours. My task is to talk about the perspectives that we saw during yesterday's discussions. There are so many. I will just mention a few essential ones. We talked about distance learning and teaching, trying to exit a sort of negative stereotype. And we saw this distance teaching as an instrument that can multiply local excellence. Maurizio has already mentioned a few, the CISA courses, ICTP, Volta, University of Trieste. They are unique at national level and sometimes even internationally. So distance learning allows for good training and allows us to reach learners in a wider way. Another topic connected to distance learning, we saw new tools connected to VR, lifelong learning for workers that can be involved in distance learning. Training on the job instruments can be replaced, but or if not added to these tools, topics from academia or advanced research that are projected towards companies that can use these new methodologies to train their workers. The second topic that I believe to be relevant, and I see was part of other sessions too, is that not that of healthcare mainly, but well-being. So healthcare and well-being together, not just one as a tool for treatment, but as a tool to accompany the weaker parts of our population, and the aging part, who has health issues. With methodologies and processes, we can ensure good aging. and a good health management. We talked about the relationship between the area and the hospitals. We heard what the original minister Riccardi said today on the media, and not only as an advantage for all of us, but as an essential tool for economic sustainability in our healthcare systems. Thank you, Mr. Steindler. I just want to underline, maybe journalists have maybe misrepresented distance learning. Could actually be an example of good practice. We, of course, go back to teaching in present, but technology at a teaching level should be enhanced and not forgotten. We certainly did way less fewer kilometers.
Quindi con dottoressa Skoko parliamo di...
Microphone is not on. Now, good afternoon. I'll try in Italian. I apologize. My Italian is far from perfect. I wanted to summarize everything that we heard yesterday during the session on research for biotech innovation. I'm very happy. I was very happy to chair that session with representatives of local biotech businesses or international centers like the ICGB, entities belonging to the local health system. I'm very happy to say that we all agreed after so many presentations in saying that joint efforts were made in the COVID era to collaborate, and many scientists belonging to international or local research centers are now involved in developing in studying the COVID virus. And also local centers have focused their attention on infectious diseases. We've heard from Halifax, we've heard from Serikim and other local companies. And this has led to a real-time collaboration among these scientists in an effort to produce and manufacture diagnostic kits. There has been a collaboration between the virology group of ICGB with the local and regional centers and organizations. We've heard from the research center in Freiburg that has developed a very easy and effective diagnostic kit. And also joint efforts were made to develop various antiviral drugs by exploiting, for instance, plants as well. Or we've heard from Serikim that they were repurposing medications. So they were considering and studying existing drugs developed for other diseases, and they are verifying whether they can be effectively used against COVID. So strong partnerships have emerged locally, regionally, and internationally. And what I wanted to stress is that there is the will to preserve everything that we have been able to build here in this region. We all agreed that by investing in a wider network of partners, we can achieve better results. We can rapidly increase the local production. We're also convinced that there could be a temporary interruption in the biotech effort, but it will be a temporary interruption. We are convinced that the business, this industry will continue to develop new drugs, new kits, new instruments. We've heard about new drugs against rare diseases, orphan drugs, and the need has been highlighted for our country to adapt measures to protect this innovation system. And this should be part also of the National Plan for Resilience and Recovery. Of course, funding should be increased, or at least we should seize the opportunities offered by various instruments to finance startups and new innovative companies. There are instruments, there are funds available, and they should be exploited. We've heard it today. There is a Horizon. There are many different instruments that we might use to relaunch our research for biotech innovation. I have a question. You talked about something that even in the media has been somehow neglected. In other words, the fact that research in other fields had slowed down, whereas research against COVID was really extraordinary in its results. But as happens after the wars, I mean, COVID was a real war, there has been a major development of science and technology, which is the application of research. Will we be able to see that? Well, that is our conclusion, but as we read in all scientific reports and when we read all possible prediction and estimates, this is absolutely true. We have to learn the lessons that COVID taught us. So we have developed research in one field, we have increased it in one field, and now we are planning to apply what we've learned to other domains. So we're all ready, and we will be able to react promptly in the future. Thank you. Thank you for your summary. Thank you for what you told us, and I wish you really fruitful results with your activities. We are all in your hands. And now, we are saving time indeed. Maybe we will have time for further remarks or questions. And now I'd like to invite Andrea Tracogna and Roberta Terpin for the plenary session on bank, finance and insurance, both remotely. Welcome. We're talking about subjects that do border on science, of course, but ordinary citizens maybe are more familiar with banks and finance and insurance. In other words, how bank, finance and insurance can ensure the well-being that is one of the most important goals. If you agree, I'll give the floor to Roberta Terpin first, if you agree. Actually, Professor Tracogna was to make a summary, was supposed to make a summary of the session. So we proceed with Professor Andrea Tracogna. You have the floor. Thank you. Not that we really decided who was to talk first, but given that I work in the academia, I prefer to make a summary and then leave to Roberta Terpin to enter into the details. And we're talking about finance for innovation, for startups, for entrepreneurs. And we do so in a wide context. Clearly, finance adopts very standard formulas. So we didn't ask ourselves what health and well-being are and what's the distinction between bio-ICT or biomed. So our focus was quite wide. Which is the mission of finance? Is that of connecting the world of science with the world of business, the world of research with the world of innovation. Innovation is an economic phenomenon. It needs finance. It needs the typical functions of finance, which is support to investments, money, if we oversimplify. But actually, we can help in selecting the most promising projects, because not all potentially innovative projects are worth pursuing. Finance is able to manage that risk. We start from research, and research is always very risky, and it usually takes quite a lot of time. Finance then helps entrepreneurs to define business models, value creation models that ensure a certain yield to investors. In finance for innovation, we have a very rich plethora of stakeholders. And to accompany these innovation projects in the various stages, we start from the, let's say, from the academia, from basic research, and then projects really have to demonstrate that they're valuable. We talk about comfort concept, which says that a project has been approved and deserves being supported in being translated into a product. From the proof of concept to the market, we have to involve other actors. Here we have seed capital funds. When there is no company as yet, we have the pre-venture capital funds, we have business angels, we have crowdfunding activities, we have private equity funds, and finally we have institutional investors. The whole of these actors have been inhabiting our session. Then I give the floor to Roberta, who represents one such actor. These actors do not confine themselves to providing money, but they do accompany all these efforts. They provide instruments, they provide training, they provide support in the form of training, they create opportunities for networking. We are really talking not just about providing money, but working with these entrepreneurs. And then there is public finance. We're talking about funds that are made available by non-private actors. And I'm thinking about national governments, but also the European Union. Other speakers have referred to these funds, and we are all waiting for this huge amount of money that is going to be allocated through the National Plan for Resilience and Recovery. There is optimism, at least in the world of finance, for the prospects of this micro sector. Health, well-being, and bio hyphen whatever the next word is going to be. 2020 and 2021, despite the pandemic, have been exceptional years from the viewpoint of yield and growth. Perhaps less so in Italy, because we are paying the price for for a different level of evolution of finance versus other countries. I hope I've left some topics for Roberta to deal with. Absolutely. Thank you, Professor Tracogna. Very interesting. And now we give the floor to Roberta Terpin, and then maybe a small remark on my side. Now, good morning. Andrea said something absolutely true. 2020 and 2021 have been exceptional years, not just for our sector, but for finance. All speakers this morning have highlighted that this sector is going through an exceptional growth for at least another couple of years, and finance is finally adopting the best practices that are already there in other countries. We can say that these best practices did not exist up to a couple of years ago. We really heard many perspectives this morning, all belonging to the same domain. And this major relaunch and revival of finance in the bio-high-tech sector will continue over the next years. The slides of some speakers have shown that in terms of funding and investment, we are approaching to the same sum invested by the US, which is the largest market, as we know, which is a sign of hope. And over and above traditional actors of finance, business angels and private equities, we now have great hopes in the National Plan for Resilience and Recovery. So there will be other financial instruments that will be added up to risk capital, and together these two instruments will be really a catalyst. In regional terms, the region has identified health and smart health as one of the 5 most important macro areas, which is again a sign of hope for us. As I was saying, I want to be realistic. We are a regional fund. We know that right now the market is characterized by some anomalies. Anomalies that might have an impact on the bio-high-tech sector. I'm referring to high transport cost, lack of raw materials, cost of electricity, and these are all elements that are disturbing the market. So my suggestion is to take that into account for the future, so that these major hopes that we have can be further consolidated without being affected by these disturbances. Everything's going all right, but we have to be careful. That's my suggestion. Thank you, Roberta Terpin. And I really feel that I have to highlight a couple of aspects. First of all, what you mentioned yourself, this revival of financial investors, because we have a picture of investors. Finance is ugly and ugly, but very rich. But as you said, and Professor Tracogna agreed, there is an ethical approach of finance, because you are involved in selecting the project and you accompany entrepreneurs, you assist them. So this is an important task of public finance, an important one. So thank you. Thank you for your summaries and contributions. So I think we can move on to the Next, a couple of speakers with plenty of time now. So I'd like to invite Professor Sanguinetti, and Roberto Siagri.
Prego, accomodatevi. Buondì. Io vi darei la parola banalmente.
I'm going to give you the floor according to the list I have here. So Guido Sanguinetti. Our session was on bio-ICT research, so bio-hyphen, as Professor Traconia said, but a quite important hyphen here, because here IT is a driver in this system, just like many other systems. We had a very varied session with public institutions representatives, Beatrice Del Franto, from the Healthcare Directorate, Fabio, from ITIS, who presented a contrasting one, because Ms. Del Frate told us about the wealth of data at regional level. The social assistance data set, for example, the care of the elderly, is quite limited. It's quite scarce. While on the other one hand we have a good data set, on the other there's very little data on how to support house robots and reform the home assistance for the elderly. Then we had two speeches from Roberto Pugliese from Elettra, who talked to us about the activity of Elettra and the Synchrotrone to generate a great deal of data which is relevant for biomedical research, a topic which was suggested the importance of data, the quantity that cannot be transferred back and forth on the cloud. Mr. Pugliese also, after his personal story on the glioblastoma disease that impacted his family, and then the CISA with Professor Alessandro Laio spoke about brain tumors, the project that has just started with BioValley and with Professor Scrub. And Alessandro talked about very important topics, because it's not very clear what big data is. On the one hand, we have Electra generates big data, huge size and quite rich with a lot of data points. But on the other hand, a lot of data, such as the data from biopsies of tumors, are heavy data. So they're big data in the wrong way. We have relatively few patients, but this is a completely new challenge for AI compared to analyzing huge masses of data that you have, for example, on Instagram. And then we had four stories from entrepreneurs, Poli, Urban Albanese, and Massimiliano Versace. It was very interesting to see how AI was the common denominator, but there have been interesting facts, such as data is the new oil, according to The Economist. And data, just like oil, you can't just put it inside the tank of a car and drive away. You have to start from oil and have to refine it. The same thing with data. What kind of questions and algorithms can be applied? And then the collaboration they had with regional authorities like Asuji to create this application, COVID Helper, Sentinel for Health. And I believe that this was the sum up of what was done. If Roberto wants to talk about the challenges and the future, I will latch on to what you said. Certainly, it's going to be a total kind of future. Stakeholders that were in separate sectors, especially after the pandemic, a characteristic of the digital era is putting together people and data. We need some sort of an open data that can be accessed by multiple stakeholders is an issue because it slows down the possibility of developing new services. We saw that the future is focused on well-being. There's no difference between healthcare and life. We saw that with COVID are interconnected. You can't have the patient and a healthy person. We are all part of a vital process that Negroponte also said when writing being digital, a question of data not being digital. So it would be essential towards going towards open data and availability of data, because this would help the elderly, but not only the elderly, also the people who are discharged from the hospital to benefit from services with a great added value. We saw these the telepresence in Synchrotron with robots that help us experimenting remotely, which is an extra step for those and might help people who are at home. If AI cannot work without good data, there's data wrangling and managing, that is cleaning the data in order to clean the data so that it can be fruitful and significant. In this pandemic, we saw that the digital transformation was fostered, and especially in hospitals. Why? Because they were forced to do so. They had to move these innovative services in the cloud, which we called SAS. And we're going to move even more in this direction. We're going to have this data in as open data, because if we want the private-public partnership have the aims that we want them to have, we need to define not only what brings each party to the partnership, but the data too. Bio-ICT does not work without data. Progress can come out of this. And I believe that the panel showed the need to work together on the data front. We also had some presentations on the interoperability of data among various hospitals and institutions, the medical records. And as the data is not that big, but just takes a lot of space, if you can't share the data amongst, it's beautiful. It's not big. It means that if you download it, they will fill your hard disks, but statistically, you can use them to create predictions with a certain degree of certainty. The topic of small data and big data also emerged. You can't get a lot of significance from small sets of data unless you have the instruments to do so. But data is a fascinating topic, but we need to share it a little bit more. And the medical record is an example. Thank you. You've been excellent. You continue to have a dialogue that has been fruitful and comes from a long history amongst yourselves. I found it very interesting that we can clean the data to render them significant, and I believe it is a very important aspect. You are working on this topic, and the access to data, the data pirating, data has new wealth. Since we have managed to be ahead of time, and I remember that Professor Sanguinet, I was an IT teacher. I don't know if you are cinema fanatics. I am. I don't know if you saw Last Call, a film a few years ago that was telling the story of the great crisis in 2008, the financial crisis. At a certain point, S.p.A, who was one of the major elements, asks, who discovered that the big bang is about to crash? I did it. I'm an aeronautical engineer. Why are you here? It's all about numbers, he said. And yes, it is indeed all about numbers. And it's important to have somebody who cleans the data to benefit us all. So have a great day, and congratulations for those who put together. I think we have the last group. I think we skipped the first point. I would invite here Lydia Alessio-Vernì. And Nadio della. I know you met each other before. If I'm not wrong, Ms. Alessio-Vernì works for the Agenzia Lavoro and Sviluppo Impresa in the region, and Nadio della is the president of Ermenea Studi and Strategie di Sistema. If I understand it correctly, we're going to deal with the center of the matter, because we're going to talk about policy. Because everybody's excellent, and can be measured and accompanied, but politics dictates the rules and can mark the development. Alessio-Vernì. It was a very varied and interesting session on various levels and types of stimuli. We were talking about policy and for health and well-being in technology innovation. I went through the Wikipedia definition of policy, and it's not a complete definition, but it's a group of actions or non-actions which is put into place by public or private subjects, and it's connected to a collective problem, and I would add a collective vision, that of investing. Around this topic, we had a panel that started with the implementing of policy in the European space of research. Karina Firkaviciute from the European Commission illustrated what were the calls that are about to be published, especially on the transversal pillar of this program, which could be interesting for our area and the collaborations that it can foster. She told us about the importance of reaching out to the national contact points and how these programs are very detailed. It was a technical presentation that showed us that in the concrete development of the policies, which is very finance, it's not very easy to understand the logic. And in conclusion, she told us that it's easy to apply. The time limits have been shortened, so there are several simplifications. Unfortunately, afterwards we had a very short video from Amadou Ndaye from Senegal, as the director of the Abasso and Dow Hospital in Dakar. And we know that we have a longer presentations from him that will talk about the investments there and how they are dealing with the emergency. So, in our panel, we moved towards defining the fact that policy is about concrete services and products, and situations that demand responses on a specific topic, in this case, the health emergency. Giorgio Paolucci, as Chief Scientific Officer for Elettra, reminded us what is the research that was carried out at Elettra Cinquatrone, and particularly those during the emergency connected to the medical side of research. I'm not a scientist, but he made us understand how this great facility and possible structure that attracts investments, he showed us how it was managed remotely when the services could not be offered in presence, especially when companies, for example, ask for non-disclosure or industrial secrecy clauses. And he gave us two examples which are very important for policies: the importance of a common language between companies, and challenge, so to speak, whether we're going to be able, with the current situation, to spend and commit more than anything to use adequately the resources of the resilience and recovery plan. The 0.35. Yes, the national plan was more of a leitmotif in our discussion, because the policy was under debate in Italy, but there are many others, like the European funds, local funds and programs that are about to be launched. He also I concluded the session with Antonello Pezzini. We are a society that is continuously moving towards the future. He reminded us the wealth of the city and the investment in research. And I might add also at a regional level, smart health, biomed, ICT, all topics connected to healthcare with a company side, which have already been included in the previous plan. As Francesco told us earlier, we are strong innovators because we have the ability to read and innovate. Going back to his presentation, he reminded us, as in Italy there's a proliferation of levels that need to be connected vertically and horizontally, and he reminded us the importance about the medium enterprise, which is not yet complex as a great company, it's not frail as a small company, and in our experience, it's the company that is a form of local glue to interpret stability and growth in the area. And I think Nadia is going to speak about this in his conclusion. Jerry Kratiger from the Fribourg Development Agency showed us how you can be an instrument for a policy. I liked his presentation very much because I identified with what we are doing, because we attract investments too. And he showed how in his area there is a strong innovation policy. And there's an activity that favors the local companies and attracts new investments. Yes, new investments, but not if they're competing with companies that are already working in the area. It's a very complex topic. They are connected at the national level that allows them to be even more present in the area. And they have customized packets in order to help companies and attract investments. So this connection, local, cantonal, federal, the final presentation of Antonello Pezzinen, who is the representative of Confindustria that validates extremely important processes, and he also works in the Ministry of Ecological Transition and Energy Efficiency. He spoke about the national and European dimension that is strategic today more than ever. And this is how the panel ended, that of the consulting partnership, the importance of policies, not an invention from the offices, but public administration that talks with the companies, the area, and then with the research world and the training sector. Antonello Pezzine talked about the national plan and said, study it, read it, understand it, because we're running out of time, and this policy will commit Italy to a very high degree of high level of challenge. We close the circle by saying that policies are all about implementing, acting. And I was smiling to the speakers before me because they were talking about waiting for the funds, and since we work in regional administration, we know that the time is nigh. We need to start working and presenting projects. It was a very diversified panel. Thank you. Because you showed us the difference between politics as a stereotype, a chit-chat, and policy, which means choices, facts, procedures. These are those that matter. On the national plan, I'm sure that Mario Draghi read it and maybe even written it. But it's not enough that he read it. We all must share it. It's basically a shared challenge. Nadia Delay, you have the floor. I'm going to look at the immediate future, which derives from what we said. Technological transfer policies, I might be talking about the obvious, but nobody thinks about what is obvious. A technological transfer policy must put at its core the company. Isn't it obvious? No, because the university does it. Some universities are able to put themselves in the company's shoes, but it's difficult actually, because this institution, but there's also first, second, and to be honest, does not put the student at the core. Maybe the personnel comes first, as it happens in public education. So put the company at the core. be it a startup or a company that wants to grow. It's not that obvious. The healthcare system prepared 1,000 conferences saying the patient must be at the core, and then please go to a hospital and check out the real situation. So put the company at the core, not the public institution that goes second. Of course, that also they also matter, but it has to be, the importance is the company. And the second, let's leave gateways for companies so they can use the tools in the area to have an applied idea, because they have one idea or they want to add another. And the pragmatism here is that you need three leverages, just like you have a leverage buyout to take over a company, there's also policy leverage. And number one is that the vertical one. Because if we talk about policies, we think about public institutions that are active in policies, or a consortium, or go towards companies, and it's good. There are some who are good and some bad, maybe too many, they can't coordinate, but it's a gateway. A lot of money from the national plan will go through that. Second item, which is neglected, is the horizontal leverage. What happened before policies was that a company could grow internally, and it takes forever, or it goes through M&As, through external acquisition or external alliances, or through other companies that help it grow and strengthens the sector, or it creates a network. There's not only acquisition at stake here. So let's leave space for the medium enterprise, because we don't have big enterprises anymore. Who wants to take the road of the innovation, be it small or big, needs to look around, because it has an internal office, and this is from my personal experience. It will become highly bureaucratic. I had to be a consultant in Fiat for 3 years. In order to have the study office, the design office, and the line office to define a common position on hydrogen, it took me 6 months. This is how the big company works. So, I take a small company, I acquire it, I absorb it. So the medium enterprise road in Trieste is a second gateway, which is highly important for the entrepreneurial environment. Like Lydia said, it has grown enough to be managed, financed, to be exported, to has acquired maybe companies abroad, and somehow knows how to move. But, if I may, it maintains an act of love for its area. Maybe. So, since we have 20,000 SMEs in Italy, in industry, which are the backbone of this country, because no big companies exist anymore. The borderline between medium and large is quite thin, actually. They exist, they're strong. 5,000 of these are excellent, and they are the international multinationals that we, as we defined them in the past. They need to have a selling point, pocket size. and they have the rating for their specific sector, offering a guaranteed that they are educated and stronger. So if on this market we have 3 or 4 entrepreneurs in different sectors, in the big bio chain or something, this is valid for agriculture and other sectors. This is what, when I talk about, and there's a third leverage. Lydia already mentioned it many times, as she's the person responsible for the agency. You can have a partnership between public and private subjects, which can be mostly public and a few private. They can be at the same level, or it could be mainly private with a tiny bit of public. Let's leave the gateway open because we need to speak company language. And lastly, as Lydia said, we have the issue of implementing, and I'm talking about policies notwithstanding the national plan or others. I see that there are a lot of offers in method from these institutions. I don't know what they really do actually, but the problem is to self-assess and to be assessed, because sometimes we build a castle of methodology. It doesn't matter whether the concepts are German or Swiss or any institution, they're the same thing. They will speak about method, and the automatic question is, what results did your method have? Because that's a whole different matter. It's valid for public institutions and private finance, and valid also for agencies. This is an important step. Why do we need execution? Because we're fragile. We haven't taken care of the intermediate step. This means that we didn't represent the social institutions or the politics. The problem with how much money we'll be able to take home. Where's the problem? When you manage to publish law, Draghi, I hope you're going to publish all 42, and when you do a central high management, you have to have decrees. Still have 60, 70 decrees from the past. So the intermediate stage, you need to be good at inventing, eliminate difficulties, rules. So it's quite difficult. But if I go to her agency, she has the same problem because she has to comply with public rules. You can't joke about this. So the intermediate stage, we forgot about it, thinking that the summit will decide. Careful, Draghi has the head, but we need the hands. And for the hands, we need the central administration and management, the intermediate administration. So if I must say something, look at the intermediate stage immediately. This is valid for transferred policies, but also for the money that we need to absorb if we're good with calculations. So be careful about the intermediate stage in order to leverage on a daily basis besides the national plan. Work hard on this part because you don't have the hands either. The head, the CEO, defines policy but then has to entrust it to someone. And that has to be at the center of the company, understand the language of the company, understand the company. If you are a public clerk, you have to understand this.
Allora, grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, della and Alessio-Vernì. Thanks to all of you. We are closing this conference exactly on time. Special thanks on my part, because I've learned really a lot while chairing this session, and learning is always so extraordinary. The knowledge that you have accumulated over these couple of days is amazing. And I think you should disseminate what you've learned so far, so that the city and the region can bathe in this knowledge. So thank you once again, and I give the floor to Diego for the conclusions.